The wheels of the stagecoach were still spinning when Mara hit the dirt. She landed crooked, shoulder first, the impact knocking the air clean out of her lungs. For a second there was nothing, no sound, no breath, just the hard certainty that she'd broken something important. Then the pain came rushing in like a flood, and with it the hot sting of gravel embedded in her cheek. "That's far enough for you." The voice came from above, male, flat. She didn't need to see his face to know the kind of man who spoke like that, the kind who enjoyed watching things end. The stagecoach driver spat tobacco into the dust beside her head. "Told you she wasn't worth the fare." Boots crunched, footsteps moving away, the rattle and creak of the coach pulling off without her. Mara tried to push herself up and her arm gave out. She went down again, tasting copper and dirt. Somewhere close a door slammed. Then another. The sound of the town waking up to free entertainment. She could hear them gathering even before she managed to lift her head. Red Hollow didn't look like much from ground level, just a crooked main street, buildings leaning into each other like drunks, and a sky so wide and indifferent it made you feel small just looking at it, the kind of place where nothing good happened on purpose. Lord have mercy. Is she dead? Should be, looking like that. Voices piled on top of each other, none of them coming closer. Mara blinked hard, trying to focus. Shapes materialized, people forming a loose half-circle, keeping a respectful distance from whatever mess she represented. Women clutched shawls tighter. Men crossed their arms. A few kids peeked out from behind skirts, eyes wide. No one helped. She got one knee under her, then the other. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, fabric dark with blood and road dust. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. "Someone should fetch the doctor," a woman said, voice high and uncertain. "For what?" Another answered. "Look at her. That's not our problem." Mara finally got upright, swaying on her feet. The world tilted hard to the left and she had to lock her knees to keep from going down again. When her vision cleared, she found herself staring at 24 faces, all watching, none offering a hand. A man in a store apron stepped forward, not to help, but to get a better look. He was older, jowls sagging, eyes sharp with the kind of curiosity that had nothing kind behind it. "You got people here?" he asked. Mara shook her head. Mistake. The movement sent pain spiking through her skull. "Money?" Another shake. Smaller this time. His mouth thinned. "Then what exactly are you doing in Red Hollow?" "Leaving," she managed. Her voice came out rusted, barely recognizable. "Soon as I can walk." Someone laughed. Not kindly. The man in the apron looked her up and down with the efficiency of someone pricing livestock. "You don't look like you can walk to the end of the street, much less out of town." "I'll manage." "Sure you will." He turned to the crowd, raising his voice. "Anyone know her?" Silence. "Anyone willing to vouch for her?" More silence, heavier this time. Mara felt it settling over her like a sentence. She'd been in towns like this before, places where your worth got decided in the first 30 seconds, and once the judgment was made, there was no arguing with it. She could see it in their faces. They'd already worked out what kind of woman showed up alone, bruised, broke, and dumped in the street like garbage. The story wrote itself. "Thought so." The man in the apron wiped his hands on his trousers, like touching the air near her might leave a stain. "Best move along then. We don't take in strays." A younger woman stepped forward, blonde hair pinned back severe, face tight with something that looked like concern but wasn't. "She's bleeding, Henry. We can't just..." "Can't just what, Alice? Take her in? Feed her? You volunteering?" Alice's mouth opened, closed. She looked at Mara, then away. "No, I just meant..." Then it settled. Mara's legs were starting to shake. She could feel herself losing the battle with gravity, but she'd be damned if she went down in front of these people again. She took one step, then another. Each one cost her, but she kept moving because stopping meant admitting they were right about her. The crowd parted. Not to help, just to avoid contact. She made it maybe 10 feet before her knee buckled. This time when she went down, she didn't try to catch herself. The ground came up fast and she hit it with the resignation of someone who'd run out of fight for the day. Dust puffed up around her face. She could taste it, fine and bitter. Footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. A man's voice, different from the others, quieter. "That's enough. Stay out of this, Hale. Not your concern." Looks like someone's concerned ought to be. She's not from here. Probably running from something. You want that trouble on your doorstep? Don't much care what she's running from. Care that she's bleeding out in the middle of the street and you're all standing around like it's a Sunday social. Silence stretched out. Mara kept her eyes closed. Easier that way. Then, hands, careful. One sliding under her shoulders, the other beneath her knees. She was lifted with surprising gentleness. Not like cargo, but like something that still mattered. Put her down, Rowan. She's not worth the hassle. Seems to me that's for her to decide, not you. The voice belonged to the body carrying her. She could feel the rumble of it through his chest. Low, steady. The kind of voice that didn't waste words on arguments it wasn't going to win. Mara cracked her eyes open. The man holding her wasn't young, but he wasn't old either. Somewhere in that hard middle ground where men stopped counting years and started counting scars. Weathered face, jaw shadowed with a few days of stubble, eyes the color of rain. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the crowd with an expression that managed to be both polite and completely uninterested in whatever they had to say. Rowan, the man in the apron tried again. I'll bring her to Doc Brennan's. He can decide if she's worth the hassle. He's out of town. Then I'll bring her to Ellen's. That got a reaction. Several women exchanged looks. Alice, the blonde, actually gasped. Ellen's? She made it sound like he'd suggested setting the woman on fire. You can't be serious. Ellen takes boarders. Woman needs a room. Ellen takes certain kinds of boarders, Henry said, voice dropping with implication. You sure that's the message you want to send? About her? About you? Rowan looked at him for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice hadn't changed. Still level, still calm, which somehow made it worse. Henry, with all respect, I don't give half a damn what message you think I'm sending. Woman needs help. I'm helping. You got a problem with that? You can take it up with me tomorrow when I'm not busy. He turned and started walking before anyone could form a counter-argument. Mara let her head rest against his shoulder. She was too tired to be embarrassed, too hurt to care what it looked like. The town watched them go. She could feel their eyes tracking every step, already spinning the story into whatever shape fit their assumptions. Let them talk. Wouldn't be the first time. You got a name? Rowan asked. His voice was quieter now, meant just for her. Mara. Rowan Hale. Thanks. The word came out thick. For the help. Don't thank me yet. Ellen's got a mouth on her and no patience for bullshit. She'll patch you up, but she'll have questions. I've got answers. They any good? Not particularly. She felt more than heard his short exhale. Not quite a laugh, but close. Well, at least you're honest. They crossed the main street and turned down a side lane where the buildings leaned even closer together, like they were trying to keep secrets. Fewer people here. The ones who did notice them turned away quick, making themselves busy with nothing in particular. Town always this friendly? Mara asked. Only when they're trying to impress visitors. This time she did hear the dry edge to his voice. Almost humor. Almost. The boarding house sat at the end of the lane, a two-story structure that had seen better days but refused to admit it. Paint peeling, shutters hanging crooked, front steps worn smooth by years of traffic. The sign above the door read Ellen's in faded letters. No other explanation offered or needed. Rowan kicked the door with his boot since his hands were full. It's open! A woman's voice sharp as broken glass. He shouldered through into a dim front room that smelled like coffee and old tobacco. The space was cluttered but clean. Mismatched furniture, a desk buried under papers, photographs on every available surface. Ellen? Rowan called. In the kitchen. What are you? A woman emerged through a doorway, wiping her hands on an apron. She stopped mid-step when she saw what Rowan was carrying. Want. Ellen was maybe 50, maybe 60, built like someone who'd done hard work her whole life and would fight anyone who suggested she slow down. Gray hair pinned back without vanity, eyes sharp enough to cut. Those eyes raked over Mara in about 3 seconds and saw everything. Where'd you find her? Main Street, stagecoach dumped her. Dumped? Ellen said it flat, without surprise. She moved closer, already reaching for Mara's face to turn it toward the light. Her hands were rough but efficient. She conscious? Mostly. Can she talk? I'm right here, Mara said. Ellen's mouth twitched. Might have been approval. So you are?
You hurt anywhere besides the obvious? Ribs, maybe. Can't tell yet. Can't tell means yes. Ellen looked at Rowan. Bring her upstairs, second door on the right. Room's empty. Rowan started for the stairs. And Rowan? Ellen's voice stopped him. You know what bringing her here looks like? Yeah.
You care? No? Good. Neither do I. But she will when she hears what people say. People always say something, Mara cut in. Might as well give them something worth talking about. Ellen's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent. I like her already. Get her upstairs. I'll bring water and bandages. The room was small and plain. A bed, a dresser, a window with curtains that didn't quite close all the way. Rowan set Mara down on the bed with the same care he'd used carrying her, like sudden movements might cause everything to break further. You need anything else before I go? Mara looked up at him. Why'd you do it? Do what? Pick me up. Everyone else was fine watching me bleed. Rowan was quiet for a moment, hands shoved in his pockets, expression unreadable. My wife died 3 years back, he said finally. Pneumonia. Took her fast. When she was at her worst, people came by, brought food, sat with her so I could sleep, helped bury her when the time came. He paused. Figure I owe the world a few kindnesses back. That's all this is. That's all? That's all. He left before she could say anything else. Ellen appeared a few minutes later with a basin of water, clean cloth, and a bottle of something that looked medicinal and probably tasted like hell. She set everything on the dresser and got to work without asking permission. This is going to hurt, she said, pressing the cloth to the gash on Mara's temple. It did. Mara hissed through her teeth but didn't pull away. Ellen worked in silence for a while, cleaning blood and dirt with brisk efficiency. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. You running from someone? Mara considered lying, decided against it. Yes. He coming after you? Don't know. Maybe. That man got a name? Darius Kincaid. Ellen's hands paused for half a second. Kincaid. I know that name. Most people do. He the one who put these bruises on you? Some of them, not all. Ellen sat back, studying Mara's face like she was reading a map. You married to him. Was. Might still be, legally. It's complicated. Complicated how? The kind of complicated where I don't know if I'm a widow, a runaway wife, or something else entirely. Ellen made a sound that could have been sympathy or just acknowledgement. Well, whatever you are, you're bleeding on my sheets, and that makes you my problem for now. She soaked the cloth again, wrung it out. You got plans? Not die. Beyond that, I'm flexible. Good answer. Ellen went back to cleaning, her hands gentler now. You can stay here long as you need. I charge by the week, and I don't ask questions as long as the rent's paid. But word of advice, this town's got a long memory and a short temper. Whatever brought you here, it's going to follow. Best figure out what you plan to do about that before it arrives. I'll keep that in mind. Do. Ellen stood, gathering the bloody cloths. Get some sleep. You look like hell. Feel worse. Yeah. Ellen moved toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. That man downstairs. Rowan, he's a good one. Rare around here. Don't make him regret helping you. I'll try not to. Trying's not good enough. Do better. She left, closing the door with a soft click. Mara sat alone in the small room, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. Voices downstairs too muffled to make out. The creak of floorboards. Somewhere distant, a dog barking. She should sleep. Her body was demanding it, every bruise and cut adding its vote. But her mind wouldn't stop spinning, running through the same circuits. How she got here, what came next, whether she'd finally run far enough, or if this was just another stop on a journey that never ended. The window showed a slice of red hollow, rooftops, a water tower in the distance, sky fading toward dusk. Not beautiful, not welcoming, just there. She lay back carefully, testing each rib for protest. Found plenty. The ceiling had water stains shaped like continents she didn't recognize. Tomorrow she'd have to face whatever came next. Tonight, she just needed to make it through without falling apart. The knock came just as she was starting to drift off. Yeah? Her voice sounded far away. The door cracked open. Ellen again, this time carrying a tray with soup and bread that looked like it had seen better days but smelled like heaven. "Eat," Ellen said, setting it on the dresser. "You need strength for what's coming." "What's coming?" "Everything." Ellen moved back to the door. "Always is in places like this. Get used to it." She was gone before Mara could ask what that meant. The next morning came too early and too bright. Mara woke to sunlight cutting through the gap in the curtains like an accusation. Every part of her hurt, some parts worse than others. She cataloged the damage carefully. Ribs definitely bruised, possibly cracked, shoulder screaming. The gash on her temple had stopped bleeding but felt hot to the touch, and her pride was in roughly the same shape as the rest of her. She made it out of bed through sheer stubbornness and stood swaying in the middle of the room, trying to decide if getting dressed was worth the agony. Someone knocked. "You decent?" Ellen's voice. "Define decent." The door opened. Ellen took one look at Mara and shook her head. "You look worse today than yesterday. That's normal. Bruises get darker before they fade." "Here." She thrust a bundle of fabric at Mara. "Clean dress. Yours is past saving." Mara took it. Plain cotton, worn but mended carefully. "Thanks." "Don't thank me. You're paying for it." "I don't have money." "Then you'll work it off. I need someone to help with the washing. You got hands, don't you?" "Last I checked." "Good enough." Ellen crossed her arms. "Get dressed, then come downstairs. We need to talk about your situation." "My situation?" "The part where the whole town knows you're here and half of them think you're a prostitute and the other half think you're worse. That situation." Mara stared. "They don't even know me." "Don't need to. You showed up alone, beat to hell, with no money and no story. In a place like Red Hollow, that's all the information they need to fill in the blanks however they want." Ellen's expression softened slightly. "Not saying it's fair, just saying it's true. Now get dressed. We've got limited time to figure out how you're going to survive this place." She left. Mara struggled into the dress, each movement a negotiation with pain. By the time she made it downstairs, sweat was beading on her forehead, and her vision had gone spotty around the edges. Ellen was in the kitchen, pouring coffee strong enough to strip paint. She slid a cup across the table without asking if Mara wanted it. "Sit before you fall." Mara sat. The kitchen was warmer than the rest of the house, heat radiating from a cast-iron stove that looked older than both of them combined. Dishes were stacked neatly beside a basin. A window over the sink showed the back alley, where a cat was inspecting something dead with great interest. "You sober?" Ellen asked. "What?" "Sober. Drug addict? Drunk? I need to know what I'm working with." "No." "Good. Makes things easier." Ellen sat across from her, cradling her own coffee. "Now, tell me what you're good at." "Good at?" "Skills, talents, things you can do that people might pay for." "Can you cook?" "Badly." "So?" "Worse." "Clean?" "Sure." "Everyone can clean." "What else?" Mara took a sip of coffee to buy time. It burned going down. "I can read, write, do numbers." Ellen's eyebrows went up. "You educated?" "Enough." "Enough how? Grammar school? Finishing school?" "I had a governess until I was 16. Then I got married and education became less important than other things." "What other things?" "Staying quiet, staying small, staying alive." Ellen was quiet for a moment, studying her. "That husband of yours, Darius, he the one who taught you that?" "He was a thorough teacher." "I bet." Ellen set her cup down. "Here's the situation. You need money, you need a place to stay, and you need people to stop thinking you're what they currently think you are. I can help with the first two, but the third requires you to do something respectable, something visible." "Like what?" "Red Hollow's school teacher quit last month. Ran off with a traveling salesman. Left us in a bad spot. 30 kids with nobody to teach them. Town council's been arguing about what to do ever since." Mara felt something shift in her chest. Not hope, she'd learned better than that, but possibility. "You think they'd hire me?" "Hell no. Not in your current state. They'd take one look at you and assume you couldn't manage a classroom full of frontier kids who'd eat you alive for sport." Ellen leaned forward. But if someone respected vouched for you, and if you cleaned up nice, and if you showed them you could handle it, maybe, just maybe. Who'd vouch for me? You? Me and Rowan both. He's got a good name in this town. People listen when he talks. And I've been here long enough that my word carries weight, even if half the town thinks I'm too rough around the edges to be a proper lady. Why would you do this? Ellen shrugged. Because I'm bored, mostly. And because watching you prove these sanctimonious bastards wrong sounds like better entertainment than anything else on offer. Despite everything, Mara felt her mouth twitch, almost a smile. When do I start? Start what? Convincing them I'm respectable. Right now. Finish your coffee. We've got work to do. The next week passed in a blur of painful labor and careful presentation. Ellen put Mara to work immediately, washing sheets, scrubbing floors, helping cook meals for the handful of boarders who passed through. The work was brutal on Mara's damaged body, but it was honest and visible. People saw her working. That mattered. In the evenings, Ellen coached her. Don't apologize for existing, Ellen said one night after Mara had instinctively said sorry for the fourth time in an hour. Half these people think you should be apologizing just for breathing. Prove them wrong by standing up straight and acting like you belong here. What if I don't? Fake it. I've been faking belonging in polite society for 40 years. Works fine if you commit to it. Rowan came by every few days, never staying long, always with some excuse about checking on repairs or delivering supplies. But Mara noticed he timed his visits for when she was visible, working in the front garden, hanging laundry, sweeping the porch, like he was deliberately creating opportunities for the town to see her doing normal, respectable things. You don't have to do this, she told him once, when he'd spent 20 minutes fixing a loose shutter that probably could have waited. Do what? Stage these little performances. I know what you're doing. Rowan hammered in one more nail before answering. Town runs on appearances. Give them the right appearances, they'll eventually change their minds. Just takes time. How much time? However long it takes. He left without elaborating. 2 weeks after Mara arrived, Ellen announced it was time. For what? To approach the council. I've already talked to 3 members, planted seeds, called in favors, reminded them how desperate they are for a teacher. Rowan's talked to the others. Tonight, we make our case. Mara's stomach dropped. Tonight? Strike while the iron's hot. You're looking better, bruises fading, you can walk without limping, and you haven't scared off any of my boarders. That's as good as it's going to get. Ellen, no backing out. You said you wanted to rebuild. This is how you do it. You stand in front of those stuffed shirts and you show them you're exactly what this town needs, even if they're too stupid to realize it yet. The town council met above the general store in a room that smelled like leather and old complaints. 6 men, all past their prime, all sitting behind a table like judges preparing to deliver verdict. Henry, the man in the apron from Mara's first day, sat in the middle. He didn't look pleased. This is irregular, he said as Mara, Ellen, and Rowan entered. Most good things are, Ellen replied smoothly, taking a seat without being invited. Mara and Rowan followed her lead. Henry's jaw tightened. We agreed to hear your proposal. That doesn't mean we're agreeing to anything else. Understood. Ellen folded her hands. Gentlemen, Red Hollow needs a school teacher. You've needed one for 6 weeks now. Your children are falling behind, parents are complaining, and every day without a teacher makes this town look more backwater than it already is. We're aware of the situation, another council member said, older white mustache, voice like gravel. What we're not aware of is why you think we should hire her. He didn't point at Mara, but he didn't need to. Because she's qualified, Rowan said. His voice was level, but there was steel underneath. She's educated, she can read and write better than anyone in this room, and she needs work. Seems straightforward. Does it? Henry leaned forward. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems reckless. We know nothing about this woman except that she showed up beaten and destitute. Those aren't exactly sterling qualifications. Neither is being born in Red Hollow, Ellen shot back. But that didn't stop you from giving the last teacher a chance. The last teacher had references. I have references, Mara said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Henry's expression was skeptical. Do you? Yes. The lie came smooth, easier than it should have. From my previous position in Missouri, I can send for them if you'd like. What position? Private tutor. For a family outside St. Louis. Name? I'd rather not say. They valued their privacy. Henry's smile was thin and cold. How convenient. It's the truth. Truth from someone we met 2 weeks ago carries limited weight. Mara felt her temper rising, dangerous but impossible to contain. And gossip from people who decided what I was worth before I'd even stood up carries more. Is that how this works? The room went quiet. Henry's face darkened. Young woman, you would do well to remember. I remember plenty, Mara cut in. I remember being thrown in the street while your town watched. I remember being judged by people who knew nothing about me except what their assumptions told them. I remember being told I wasn't worth the hassle. She stood, ignoring the protest from her ribs. You want references? Here's one. I've survived things that would break most of the men in this room. I've educated myself despite every obstacle. And I'm willing to stand here and beg for the chance to teach your children, even though every instinct says I should tell you all to go to hell. Silence. Then, sit down. It was the man with the white mustache. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had shifted. Mara sat. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You got fire, I'll give you that. Question is whether you've got the patience to not burn the whole schoolhouse down when one of these kids tests you. Because they will. Frontier children don't respond to gentle Eastern manners. I'm not gentle, Mara said. And I'm not Eastern. No? Henry's voice dripped skepticism. Where are you from, then? Everywhere and nowhere. Wherever I needed to be to survive. Another council member spoke up, younger than the others, nervous energy. The school needs discipline, structure. The last teacher let things get too loose. Can you handle that? I can handle it. How? By treating them like they matter. Children act out when they're bored or ignored. Give them something worth paying attention to, and most behavior problems solve themselves. The white-mustached man nodded slowly. Interesting theory. You ever test it? Every day of my life. He almost smiled. I like her, Henry. She's got spine. Spine doesn't qualify someone to teach, Henry said. But his resistance was weakening. Mara could hear it. Ellen pressed the advantage. Give her 1 month, trial basis. If she can't handle it, you find someone else. But if she can, you've solved your problem without spending another 6 weeks arguing about it. And if she runs off like the last one, then you're no worse off than you are now, Rowan said. But I don't think she'll run. Why not? Because she doesn't strike me as the running type. Not anymore. Henry looked at Mara for a long moment. She held his gaze, refusing to blink first. Finally, he sighed. 1 month, trial basis. Salary is $40, paid at the end if you last. You'll start Monday. School meets 6 days a week, 8 to 3. Miss a day without good reason, and you're done. 'Cause trouble, you're done. Fail to control the children, you're done. Understood? Understood. Then we're finished here. He waved them away like flies. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. Mara stood on the street, shaking slightly, not entirely sure what had just happened. You did good, Ellen said. I lied. I don't have references. I know. So does Henry. He doesn't care as long as you make him look smart for hiring you. Rowan was already walking away, hands in his pockets. Rowan, Mara called. He stopped, turned. Thank you. He nodded once. Don't thank me yet. You've got to actually teach 30 kids who'd rather be anywhere else. That's harder than talking your way past Henry. I know. Do you? No, but I'll figure it out. He studied her face, expression unreadable in the darkness. Yeah, I think you will. Then he was gone, boots echoing on the empty street. Ellen lit a cigarette, scandalous behavior for a woman her age, which was probably why she enjoyed it. You ready for this? No. Good. If you said yes, I'd know you were lying. She took a drag, exhaled smoke into the night. They're going to fight you, the kids, the parents, the town, everyone who decided what you were worth that first day. They'll be waiting for you to fail. Let them wait. Ellen smiled. There's that spine again. Hold on to it. You're going to need it. They walked back to the boarding house in comfortable silence. Above them, stars scattered across the sky like someone had shattered something beautiful and left the pieces where they fell. Monday morning, Mara thought. Monday. Everything changes. She just had to survive until then. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town like something forgotten on purpose. One room, wooden walls weathered gray, windows so dirty the light came through yellow. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Mara arrived at 7:30 Monday morning with her stomach in knots and Ellen's voice rattling around in her head. First day sets the tone. Let them see weakness and you're done. She pushed open the door. Inside smelled like dust and mouse droppings and decades of children who hadn't wanted to be there. Desks arranged in uneven rows, some broken, most carved with initials and obscenities. A blackboard so scratched it was barely usable. In the corner, a pot-bellied stove that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since statehood. This was what she'd fought for. This wreck of a room and whatever came through the door in 30 minutes. She set down the basket Ellen had packed. Chalk, a few books borrowed from someone's attic, an apple she couldn't afford to eat. Then she got to work. By the time the first children arrived, she'd swept the floor, wiped down the blackboard, arranged the desks into something resembling order, and written her name in careful letters across the top of the board. Miss Kincaid. The name still felt wrong, like wearing someone else's coat, but it was the only one she had. The children came in clusters. The young ones first, dragged by older siblings, eyes wide and uncertain. Then the middle group, loud and testing boundaries before they'd even crossed the threshold. Finally, the older ones, 14, 15, practically adults by frontier standards, who looked at her like she was a temporary inconvenience they'd outlast. Mara counted heads. 28, close enough to 30. She stood at the front of the room and waited for them to settle. They didn't. A boy in the back, tall, maybe 15, sandy hair and a smirk that promised trouble, was the loudest. You the new teacher? I am. How long you planning to last? Longer than you expect. That got a few laughs, not kind ones. A girl near the front raised her hand. She looked about 12, dark braids, serious face. Miss? Are you the lady who got thrown from the stagecoach? The room went quiet. Mara met her eyes. I am. My mama said you're not fit to teach. Your mama's entitled to her opinion. Doesn't change the fact that I'm standing here and you're sitting there. The boy in the back snorted. For now. Mara turned to him. What's your name? Why? Because I'm asking. He leaned back in his chair, making it creak. Tommy Brennan. Tommy Brennan? Are you planning to be a problem? Depends. You planning to be boring? Probably. Teaching usually is. That surprised him. She could see it flicker across his face. She addressed the whole room. Let's establish some things. I don't care what your parents think of me. I don't care what you've heard. I'm here to teach, and you're here to learn, and we're all going to be miserable if we fight each other every single day. So here's the deal. You give me a chance, I'll give you something worth paying attention to. You don't, I'll make every hour we spend in this room feel like a week. Your choice. A younger boy raised his hand tentatively. What are we going to learn? Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography. Enough that when you leave this town, you'll know there's a whole world out there, and you'll have the tools to navigate it. Why would we leave? Another girl asked. Maybe you won't, but shouldn't you have the choice? No one had an answer for that. Mara pulled a book from her basket, a battered copy of Robinson Crusoe that Ellen had scrounged from somewhere. We're going to start with a story about a man who survived being shipwrecked on an island, had to figure out everything from scratch, how to build shelter, find food, make fire, stay alive when everything wanted him dead. Sound familiar? A few kids leaned forward. Tommy Brennan's smirk had faded slightly. You gonna read to us like we're babies? No, you're gonna take turns reading to each other. Then we're going to talk about what it means to survive when no one's coming to save you. She opened the book. Who wants to start? The girl with the dark braids raised her hand. I will. Her name was Sarah. She read slowly but clearly, stumbling over longer words but pushing through. When she finished the first page, Mara nodded to the boy beside her. Your turn. They passed the book around. Some read well, some barely managed. A few refused entirely. Mara didn't push, just moved to the next person and kept going. The The story unfolded in fits and starts. Crusoe's ship going down, him washing up on shore with nothing. When they reached the part where Crusoe took stock of what he'd saved from the wreck, Mara stopped them. "What did he have?" she asked. "Tools," someone said. "Food. Gunpowder. Seeds." Mara wrote each item on the board. "Now, if you were stranded somewhere, let's say out past the broken hills where no one could find you, what would you need to survive?" The room came alive. Water, shelter, a rifle, rope, a horse, matches. Mara kept writing until the board was full. Then she turned back to them. "Here's your assignment. Tonight, I want you to think about what survival actually means. Not just living, surviving. Figuring out how to keep going when everything's against you. Tomorrow, we'll talk about whether Crusoe made smart choices or stupid ones, and what you'd do different." Tommy Brennan raised his hand, actually raised it. "Miss Kincaid? Yes? This ain't like regular school. How would you know? You skip regular school often enough." More laughs. "These ones had less edge." "Fair point," Tommy admitted. "But still, other teachers just made us copy the Bible and practice handwriting. Did you learn anything? How to sleep sitting up? Then we'll try something different." The rest of the day was chaos, but controlled chaos. Mara taught them arithmetic using practical problems. If you're buying supplies for a 3-week cattle drive, how much do you need? She taught them geography by having them map out Red Hollow and the surrounding territory from memory, arguing about what went where. She taught them grammar by having them fix the obscene carvings on their desks into proper sentences, which made even the sullen ones grin. By 3 o'clock, she was exhausted, and her voice was nearly gone. The children filed out in the same clusters they'd arrived in. A few said goodbye. Most just left. Sarah, the girl who'd volunteered to read first, lingered by the door. "Miss Kincaid? I liked today." "Thank you, Sarah." "My mama's still going to say you're not fit, but I liked it anyway." She ran off before Mara could respond. Mara sank into the chair behind her desk, the teacher's desk, she supposed, though it felt presumptuous to claim it. Every muscle ached, her throat was raw, and tomorrow she'd have to do it all again. The door opened. Rowan stood in the frame, hat in his hands. "Heard shouting, figured I'd check you were still alive." "Barely." "That good?" "That exhausting." She gestured at the room. "They didn't kill me, yet. Give them time." He stepped inside, looking around. "Place looks better than it did." "Low bar." "True." He leaned against one of the desks. "How many showed up?" 28. "Could be worse. Could be none." Ellen said the same thing. "Ellen's usually right." He paused. "You worried about tomorrow?" "Terrified." "Good instinct." He pushed off the desk. "I'll bring by some firewood. Stove's going to need it once the weather turns." "Rowan?" "Yeah?" "Why do you keep helping me?" He considered the question, turning his hat in his hands. "Told you already. I owe the world some kindness." "That's not the whole reason." "No?" "No." He was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe I like seeing someone refuse to quit when everyone expects them to. Reminds me that it's possible." "You ever wanted to quit?" "Every day since Mary died. Just haven't figured out what I'd be quitting toward." Before Mara could respond, he was gone. She sat alone in the empty schoolhouse as the light faded. Tomorrow would be harder. The children would test her more, push boundaries now that they knew where the edges were. Parents would start complaining. The town would keep watching for her to fail. Let them watch. The next 3 weeks were a war fought in inches. Some days were victories. The children engaged, asked questions, stayed after to argue about whether Crusoe should have tried to escape the island or made peace with staying. Sarah brought her younger brother, who was 6 and technically too young for school, but sat quietly in the corner drawing letters in the dirt on the floor. 2 of the older boys stopped skipping entirely. Other days were disasters. Tommy Brennan started a fight over a perceived insult, and Mara had to physically pull them apart, wrenching her barely healed shoulder. A group of girls refused to participate, sitting in stony silence for 2 hours. One of the youngest children got sick all over the floor, and Mara spent her lunch break cleaning it up because there was no one else to do it. And the parents started coming. The first was a woman named Margaret Hayes,
who arrived during the afternoon lesson with her arms crossed and her mouth already forming complaints. "Miss Kincaid, I need a word." Mara looked up from where she was helping a struggling reader sound out plantation. "I'm teaching, Mrs. Hayes. This won't take long. Then it can wait until 3. Margaret's face reddened. "I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate the interruption. 3 o'clock, Mrs. Hayes, not before."
The woman left in a huff. Several children exchanged impressed glances. At 3:15, Margaret returned with 2 other mothers in tow. "Miss Kincaid, we have concerns." Mara set down the chalk. "I'm listening." "My daughter says you're teaching them about survival instead of proper subjects." "Survival is a proper subject, particularly here. We want them learning their letters and numbers, not wild stories about shipwrecks. They're learning letters we read every day."
"Reading adventure novels isn't education. Why not?" That stopped her. "I beg your pardon? Why isn't it education? They're reading, comprehending, analyzing, discussing. Those are educational activities. It's not appropriate material for children. A man surviving on an island is inappropriate? It's not." Margaret struggled. "It's not what we expect from a school teacher." "What do you expect?" "Someone respectable." There it was. The real complaint. Mara kept her voice level. "I'm teaching your children to read, write, and think. If that's not respectable enough, you're welcome to teach them yourselves." One of the other mothers spoke up. "That's not fair. We hired you. The town council hired me for 1 month. That month isn't up. When it is, they can decide whether to keep me or find someone else. Until then, I'm doing the job I was hired to do." "We'll see what the council has to say about your attitude," Margaret said. "I'm sure you will." They left in a coordinated storm of skirts and indignation. Mara waited until they were gone, then let herself slump against the desk. Her hands were shaking. "That was amazing." She looked up. Tommy Brennan was standing in the doorway. "I thought you'd left." "Forgot my book, heard the whole thing." He grinned. "You told Mrs. Hayes she could teach her own kid. Nobody tells Mrs. Hayes anything." "I probably shouldn't have." Are you kidding? That's the best thing that's happened all year." He grabbed his book from his desk. "They're going to make trouble for you." "I know. You scared? Terrified. You don't look it." "I've had practice hiding it." He studied her for a moment. "You're all right, Miss Kincaid, for a teacher. That's a ringing endorsement. Best you're going to get from me." He left, whistling. That night, Ellen served dinner with a knowing look. "Heard you had visitors." "News travels fast." "Always does. Margaret Hayes is already telling anyone who will listen that you're insubordinate and inappropriate." "Am I?" "Probably, but you're also right." Ellen passed the bread. "Council's meeting tomorrow night, special session. About you." Mara's stomach dropped. "Already?" "Margaret's got 3 votes on the council. Her husband, her brother, and Henry, who never liked you anyway. You need to flip at least one of them or you're done." "How do I do that?" "Show them results. Bring the children. Let them demonstrate what they've learned." "Ellen, I've been teaching for 3 weeks. They're barely—" "Doesn't matter. What matters is showing the council that you're making a difference. The kids like you. That counts for something." "Does it? In a place like this? Sometimes it's the only thing that counts." The next evening, Mara arrived at the council meeting with 12 students in tow. Not everyone. Some parents had refused to let their children participate, but enough. Sarah was there, and Tommy, and a handful of others who'd volunteered when she'd explained what was at stake. The council sat in their usual places behind the table, Henry in the middle, looking like he'd already made his decision. Margaret's husband on his right, arms crossed. The white-mustached man, Mara had learned his name was Silas, on the left, expression neutral. "This is highly irregular," Henry said. "You wanted to assess my teaching," Mara replied. "Here's your chance." "We don't need a demonstration. With respect, I think you do. You're about to make a decision that affects 30 children. Shouldn't you hear from some of them first?" Silas leaned forward. "Let them speak, Henry. What's the harm?" Henry's jaw worked. "Fine. 5 minutes." Mara turned to Sarah. "Tell them what we've been learning." Sarah stood, hands clasped, clearly nervous but determined. "We're reading Robinson Crusoe. We're on chapter 7.
We talk about what choices Crusoe makes and whether they're smart or stupid, and what we'd do different if it was us. That's entertainment, not education, Margaret's husband said. It's both, Tommy Brennan cut in. Miss Kincaid makes us think about why people do things, not just what they do. Can you give an example? Silas asked. Tommy straightened. Sure. When Crusoe finds the footprint on the beach, he panics, hides in his cave for days. Miss Kincaid asked us if that was smart. Most of us said no. He should have investigated, figured out what he was dealing with. But then she asked if any of us have ever been so scared we hid instead of facing something. We all have. Made us think different about Crusoe. Made him more real. That's not arithmetic, Henry said. We do arithmetic too, another boy chimed in. Real problems, like figuring out how much fence you need for 100 acres or how much food for cattle drives, not just numbers on a page. Mara watched the council members' faces. Margaret's husband still looked skeptical. Henry was unmoved, but Silas was listening, actually listening. A girl named Emma spoke up without being asked. Miss Kincaid treats us like we matter, not like we're just kids who don't know anything. You are just kids who don't know anything, Henry said. Then why are we in school? Emma shot back. If we're too stupid to matter, why bother teaching us at all? Silence. Silas actually smiled. She's got you there, Henry. Henry's face darkened. This is exactly the problem. She's teaching them to be argumentative and disrespectful. I'm teaching them to think, Mara said quietly. If that's disrespectful, then respectability isn't worth much. That attitude is exactly what this town needs, Silas interrupted. He stood, addressing the other council members. I've watched this woman get thrown in the dirt, get dismissed by this town, and still show up every day to teach children who don't make it easy. She's doing it with no supplies, no support, and half the town waiting for her to fail. And the kids are learning. Maybe not the way we learned, but they're learning. That's what we hired her to do. The parents are complaining, Margaret's husband said. Some parents, not all. And parents complain about everything. If we fired every teacher who got complaints, we'd have no teachers at all. Her trial period is up in 3 days, Henry said. We need to make a decision. I've made mine, Silas said. I vote to keep her. Full salary, permanent position. That's premature. Is it? Henry, be honest. We're not going to find anyone better. Hell, we're not going to find anyone else, period. What respectable teacher wants to come to Red Hollow? We got lucky with her. Let's not throw that away because some people don't like that she's different. The debate went on for another 20 minutes. Mara stood with the children, listening to her future being decided by men who'd never asked her what she wanted. Finally, they voted. Silas, yes. 2 other members, yes. Margaret's husband, no. 1 abstention. Henry was the last vote. He looked at Mara for a long time, expression unreadable. Against my better judgment, he said slowly, I vote yes. But Miss Kincaid, understand this. You're on notice. 1 more complaint session like last night. 1 more incident of insubordination, and you're done. Understood? Understood. Then we're adjourned. Outside, the children celebrated like they'd won something. Sarah hugged Mara hard enough to hurt. Tommy actually shook her hand. You did it, he said. We did it, Mara corrected. You all showed up. That mattered. So what happens now? Now we keep going. Make them regret not firing me. Tommy grinned. I can work with that. The children dispersed into the night, leaving Mara alone on the street. She should feel victorious. She'd won. She had a job, a salary, a place in this town that no one could easily take away. So why did it feel like the hard part was just beginning? Congratulations. She turned. Rowan was leaning against a post, half hidden in shadow. How long have you been there? Long enough? Heard it got heated. That's one word for it. He pushed off the post, came closer. You handled it well. Did I? You're still here. That's handling it. Mara laughed, but there was no humor in it. For now. For now is all any of us get. They stood in silence for a moment. The night was cold, stars sharp overhead. Rowan, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think I'm making a mistake, staying here fighting for this? He was quiet, considering. I think you're doing what you need to do. Whether that's a mistake or not, you'll find out eventually.
But running away won't answer that question any better than staying. What if I fail? Then you fail. World won't end. Feels like it might. It won't, trust me. I failed at plenty. Still here. He tipped his hat and walked away before she could ask what he'd failed at. Mara stood alone under the stars, feeling the weight of what she'd just committed to settling across her shoulders like a yoke. 30 children counting on her. A town watching for her to stumble. And somewhere out there, maybe, a past that might not stay past forever. But tonight, she'd won. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. She turned toward Ellen's boarding house, toward the small room that was starting to feel almost like belonging, and let herself believe, just for tonight, that maybe she could make this work. Maybe she could build something here that no one could take away. The walk back was quiet, her footsteps the only sound on the empty street. When she reached the boarding house, Ellen was waiting on the porch, smoking. Well? I kept the job. Ellen nodded, unsurprised. Good. Now comes the interesting part. What part? The part where you prove they made the right choice. Mara climbed the steps, suddenly so tired she could barely stand. Can I prove that tomorrow? Tomorrow? Next week? Next month? Take your time. You've got plenty of people willing to wait for you to fail. Encouraging. I don't do encouragement. I do truth. Truth is, you picked a hard road, but you're stubborn enough to walk it. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Ellen stubbed out her cigarette. Get some sleep. You look half dead. Feel fully dead. Close enough. Mara made it to her room, collapsed on the bed fully clothed, and was asleep before she could think about what came next. In her dreams, the classroom was full, and the children were laughing, and somewhere in the back, a shadow watched that might have been Darius, or might have been nothing at all. She woke at dawn, sweating, and couldn't remember if the dream had been good or bad. It wasn't the nightmare that woke her the next morning. It was the sound of boots on the porch below her window, followed by voices pitched low enough to mean trouble. Mara pushed herself upright, every muscle complaining. The light coming through the curtains was weak and gray, early, too early for visitors unless they weren't the social kind. She moved to the window and looked down. 3 men stood outside Ellen's front door. One of them was knocking, hard and insistent. The other 2 looked like they were there to make sure the knocking got answered. Ellen appeared in the doorway, still in her nightdress, but somehow managing to look more intimidating than the men combined. It's 6 in the morning. This better be important. The man doing the knocking was someone Mara didn't recognize, middle-aged, wearing clothes too nice for Red Hollow, riding gloves still on. When he spoke, his voice carried the particular confidence of someone used to being obeyed. I'm looking for Mara Kincaid. Mara's stomach went to stone. Ellen didn't blink. And you are? My name's not your concern. I'm here on legal business. Where is she? What kind of legal business at 6 in the morning? The kind that doesn't wait. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. I've got documents here that concern Mrs. Kincaid. Need to serve them personally. She's not receiving visitors. This isn't a visit. This is a legal matter. You want to obstruct that? I can get the sheriff involved. Ellen's expression didn't change, but her voice hardened. Wait here. She closed the door in their faces. Mara was already moving, pulling on her dress with shaking hands. By the time Ellen knocked, she was almost presentable. You heard? Ellen asked, not bothering with preamble. Enough. Who is he? Don't know, but he's got papers and he knows your name. That's not good. No. Mara's voice came out steadier than she felt. It's not. You want me to send them away? They'll just come back. Better to deal with it now. Ellen studied her face. You know what this is about? I can guess. You want me down there with you? Yes. They descended together. Ellen opened the door without inviting the men inside. The man with the papers looked Mara up and down with the detached assessment of someone evaluating property. Mara Kincaid? That's me? You're being served. He held out the folded document. Mara took it. The paper was heavy, official. Her hands didn't shake when she unfolded it, which felt like a small victory. The words swam for a moment before focusing. Petition for return of lawful wife, filed by Darius Kincaid. Legal grounds. Abandonment of marital duties, theft of property, unlawful flight from legal domicile. She read it twice to make sure she wasn't imagining it.
This is a mistake, she said quietly. No mistake. Your husband's filed a legal claim. You're required to appear before a judge to contest it or accept return to his custody. I'm not his property. Law says different. You married him. You're his wife until a court says otherwise. The man's voice had the bored efficiency of someone who delivered bad news so often it no longer registered. Hearing set for 2 weeks from today. You fail to appear. Judgment goes in his favor by default. Where? County seat. Judge Morrison presiding. Mara looked at the men flanking the one who'd done the talking. They hadn't said a word, but their presence spoke clearly enough. Darius had sent muscle to make sure she understood this wasn't a request. I'll be there, she said. Smart choice. The man tipped his hat with mock politeness. Mrs. Kincaid. They left, boots echoing on the wooden walkway. Ellen shut the door and turned to Mara. Well, that's a problem. That's one word for it. What are you going to do? Mara stared at the paper in her hands. The words hadn't changed. Darius wanted her back. Had the law on his side. Could legally compel her return if she couldn't prove grounds for refusal. I don't know, she said finally. I ran because staying meant dying, one way or another. But I didn't think he'd come after me legally. Thought he'd be too proud to admit I'd left. Pride doesn't mean much when a man loses control of something he considers his. Ellen moved to the kitchen, started making coffee with sharp, angry movements. 2 weeks isn't much time. No, you need a lawyer, someone who knows how these things work. I don't have money for a lawyer. Then you need to find some. Fast. The coffee finished brewing. Ellen poured 2 cups, pushed one across to Mara. There's another option. What? Marry someone else. Legal marriage supersedes a previous one if you can argue the first was void or coerced. Mara almost laughed. Who would marry me? The town barely tolerates me as their teacher. Rowan might. The coffee cup stopped halfway to Mara's mouth. What? Rowan. He's respected, established, widowed. No complications there. If you married him, Darius would have a harder time making his case. Court might side with the established local marriage over one from out of state. Ellen, that's insane. I can't just ask a man to marry me to avoid my legal problems. Why not? People marry for worse reasons. At least this one's practical. It's also using him. So ask him if he minds being used. Might surprise you. Mara set down the cup before she spilled it. Her hands were shaking now, delayed reaction catching up. I need to think. Think fast. 2 weeks goes quick. By the time Mara made it to the schoolhouse, word had already spread. She could see it in the way people looked at her, not with their usual judgment, but with something sharper. Curiosity mixed with satisfaction. The outsider finally getting what she deserved. The children noticed, too. They came in quieter than usual, watching her like they were waiting for her to break. She didn't give them the satisfaction. Book's out, she said, voice steady. We're picking up where we left off yesterday. Sarah raised her hand. Miss Kincaid? Is it true you're in trouble? Define trouble. My pa said men came to Ellen's looking for you, said you're being sued. 28 pairs of eyes locked on Mara, waiting. She could lie, deflect, tell them it was none of their concern, and move on with the lesson. Instead, she set down her chalk and faced them directly. Yes, I'm being sued. My former husband wants me to come back. I left him because staying wasn't safe. Now he's using the law to try to force me back anyway. Silence. Then Tommy Brennan spoke up from the back. That's horseshit. Language, Tommy. Sorry, but it is. You can't force someone to be married if they don't want to be. Legally, you can. Marriage is a contract. Breaking it has consequences. Even if he hurt you? Sarah asked, voice small. Even then. Courts don't usually care about that part. Emma, the girl who challenged Henry at the council meeting, stood up. Then the law's wrong. Maybe, but it's still the law. So what are you going to do? Tommy asked. I don't know yet, but whatever I do, it won't interfere with your education. You're still getting taught and you're still learning. Understood? They nodded, but the atmosphere had shifted. The children were subdued through the morning lessons, distracted. Even Tommy didn't cause his usual trouble. At lunch, Mara sat alone at her desk while the children ate outside. She pulled out the legal papers again, reading through them with more care. The case was thin. Darius claimed she'd abandoned him, stolen money that belonged to the household, and fled without legal cause. All lies, or at least twisted versions of truth. But proving that would require evidence she didn't have, and testimony no one would believe. The door opened. Rowan stood in the frame, hat in hand. "Heard you had visitors this morning." "News travels." "Always does." He came inside, closed the door behind him. "Ellen came by the ranch, told me about the situation." Mara didn't look up from the papers. "Did she tell you her proposed solution?" "She did." "And?" Rowan pulled up a chair, sat down across from her. "And I'm considering it." That got her attention. "You're what?" "Considering it seems like a practical solution to a complicated problem." "Rowan, you can't be serious. We barely know each other." "I know you're a decent teacher who's got a bad situation through no fault of your own. I know you didn't ask for this, and I know I've got a name in this town that carries weight." He leaned back, studying her. "Marriage doesn't have to be about love. It can be about survival. Seems like that's what you need right now." Mara stared at him. "Why would you do this?" "Already told you. I owe the world some kindness." "This is more than kindness. This is your whole life." "My life's not much these days. Work the ranch, come home to an empty house, sleep, repeat. Been doing that for 3 years. Doesn't bother me, but it doesn't excite me either." He paused. "Maybe helping you gives it some purpose." "That's not a reason to get married." "What is then? You married for love the first time. How'd that work out?" The bluntness hit like a slap. But he wasn't wrong. "Rowan, I'm not saying decide right now. I'm saying think about it. You've got 2 weeks before that hearing. If you go in married to me, Darius has a harder case. Might not win it for you, but it shifts the ground. And what do you get out of this?" He considered the question. "Company, maybe. Someone to come home to that's not a bottle of whiskey. Someone who won't expect me to be more than I am." He met her eyes. "I'm not looking for romance, Mara. I had that. It's gone. But I can offer you partnership, protection, a legal shield. That worth anything to you?" "It's worth everything," she admitted. "But I don't want to trap you into something you'll regret. I'm a grown man. I'll make my own decisions about regret." The children started filtering back in from lunch, ending the conversation. Rowan stood, settling his hat back on his head. "Think about it," he said. "Let me know in a few days." He left before she could respond. The afternoon lessons were a disaster. Mara couldn't focus, kept losing her train of thought mid-sentence. The children noticed, but had the decency not to comment. By 3 o'clock, she dismissed them early and sat alone in the empty schoolhouse, trying to think through something that felt impossible. Marry Rowan. Bind herself legally to another man, even if this one offered partnership instead of control. Risk his reputation, his life, his future, on the chance it might protect her from Darius. Or refuse. Face Darius alone in court. Hope a judge would see past the law to the truth underneath. Risk losing everything she'd built here. Neither option felt right, but one felt survivable. She was still sitting there when Ellen arrived, carrying dinner wrapped in cloth. "Figured you wouldn't eat otherwise." "Thank you." Ellen sat on one of the student desks, watching Mara pick at the food. "Rowan came by, didn't he?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "That he'd do it. Marry me, if I wanted." And I think I'd be insane to accept." "Why?" "Because it's not fair to him. Because I'd be using him. Because—" Mara set down the food, unable to stomach it. "Because I swore I'd never let another man control my life again, and marriage means exactly that." "Does it?" Ellen's voice was sharp. "Rowan's not Darius. He won't control you. Hell, I doubt he'd even try." "You don't know that." "I know Rowan better than you do. Known him since Mary was alive. He's solid, steady, not a controlling bone in his body." She paused. "You're scared. I get it. But don't let fear of the last man stop you from accepting help from this one." "It's not just fear, it's—" Mara struggled for words. "If I do this, I'll owe him everything. That's not partnership, that's debt. Only if you see it that way. Could also see it as mutual benefit. He gets company, you get protection. Seems even to me." "Nothing about this is even," Ellen sighed. Girl, you're overthinking it. Question simple. Do you trust Rowan not to hurt you? Did she? Mara thought about it honestly. Rowan had never given her reason to doubt him, had helped without asking for anything back, respected boundaries she hadn't even known she was drawing. Yes, she said finally. I trust him. Then trust him enough to let him help. Rest will figure itself out. That night, Mara lay awake in her small room, listening to the house settle. Through the thin walls, she could hear other boarders, a traveling salesman snoring, a young couple arguing in whispers, Ellen moving around downstairs. She thought about Darius, about the marriage that had started with promises and ended in blood and fear, about the way he'd smiled when he hurt her, like it was his right. She thought about Rowan, about quiet strength and careful hands and eyes that looked at her like she was a person, not property. It wasn't a fair comparison, but it was the only one she had. 3 days later, she found Rowan at his ranch. The property sat a few miles outside town, accessible by a road that was more dirt and hope than actual construction. The house was modest, well-maintained, surrounded by fencing that needed repair but still stood. Cattle grazed in the distance. Rowan was fixing a gate when she rode up on a borrowed horse. He looked up, unsurprised. Figured you'd come. Did you? You're not the type to let something this big sit unanswered. He set down his tools, wiped his hands on his trousers. You made a decision? I want to ask you something first. Go ahead. If we do this, if we marry, what would you expect from me? He considered the question carefully. Help around the house when you can, conversation at dinner, honesty about what you need and what you can't give. That's about it. That's all? That's all. What about... She stopped, not sure how to phrase it. The marriage bed? He finished for her. Yes. Not unless you want it, and I doubt you do. His voice was matter-of-fact, no judgment. I had a good marriage to marry. Don't need to pretend this is that. This is something different. Partnership, like I said. Mara felt something loosen in her chest. You're sure about this? Are you? She took a breath. Yes. Then we'll do it. Quick ceremony, minimal fuss. Get it done before your hearing. Rowan? Yeah? Thank you. He shook his head. Don't thank me yet. You're about to become a rancher's wife in a town that's already suspicious of you. That's not going to be easy. Nothing about this has been easy. Fair point. He picked up his tools again. I'll talk to the minister. We can do it this weekend if you're ready. I'm ready. She wasn't, but she said it anyway. The wedding happened on a Saturday morning in the minister's parlor with Ellen and Silas as witnesses. No guests, no celebration, no pretense that this was anything other than what it was, a legal transaction with vows attached. Mara wore the same dress she'd worn to the council meeting. Rowan wore his Sunday clothes, looking uncomfortable but determined. The minister rushed through the ceremony like he had somewhere better to be. Do you take this woman? I do. Do you take this man? I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you married. You may kiss if you'd like, or not. Up to you. They didn't, just shook hands like business partners sealing a deal. Ellen hosted a small dinner afterward at the boarding house. Just the four of them, eating in relative silence because no one knew what to say. Well, Ellen finally said, raising her glass of cheap wine, here's to practical decisions and mutual survival. I'll drink to that, Silas said. They did. Rowan walked Mara back to the boarding house after dark. At the door, he stopped. You don't have to move out to the ranch right away if you're not ready. Where will you tell people I am? Getting your affairs in order, finishing out the school term, whatever sounds reasonable. Won't that look suspicious? Probably, but let them talk. We know what this is. That's what matters. Mara looked at him in the dim light from Ellen's windows. Are you a good man, Rowan Hale? I'm a man who tries. That's the best I can offer. It's more than most. He tipped his hat and left her there, standing on the porch of a boarding house she'd soon leave behind, married to a man she barely knew, preparing to face a past that wouldn't stay buried. Inside, Ellen was waiting with tea and questions. How do you feel? Married, Mara said. Again. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Ellen poured the tea, added honey without asking if Mara wanted it. You know this doesn't solve everything. I know. Court might still rule against you. Marriage to Rowan might not be enough to override your marriage to Darius, depending on how the judge sees it. I know that too. But it's better than facing him alone. Yes. Mara took the tea, grateful for something to hold on to. It's better than that. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, Red Hollow settled into its usual evening rhythm. Doors closing, lamps being lit, the distant sound of someone playing a fiddle badly. You scared? Ellen asked. Terrified. Good. Means you're taking it seriously. Ellen set down her cup. You'll need to tell the school board. And the children. This kind of news will spread whether you control it or not. I'll tell them Monday. They'll have opinions. They always do. Monday morning, Mara stood in front of her class and made the announcement without preamble. I got married this weekend. To Rowan Hale. Some of you might have questions. I'll answer what I can, but my personal life isn't really your concern. What is your concern is whether I'll keep teaching. The answer is yes. Now open your books to page 47. The children stared. Sarah raised her hand. Miss Mrs. Hale. Still Miss Kincaid here. Keep it simple. Are you happy? The question caught Mara off guard. She'd expected curiosity, maybe judgment, not concern. I'm safe, she said honestly. That's better than I've been in a long time. That seemed to satisfy them, at least enough to move on with the lesson. But the town had opinions aplenty. Margaret Hayes showed up that afternoon with 3 other mothers, faces tight with disapproval. This is highly inappropriate, Margaret announced. A teacher can't just marry anyone she pleases and expect to maintain her position. Why not? Mara asked. Because it sets a bad example for the children. What example? That women can make their own choices? That women can marry in haste without proper consideration. I considered plenty, decided marriage was better than the alternative. And what alternative was that? Facing my legal problems alone. That stopped Margaret cold. She'd heard about this lawsuit, everyone had, but bringing it up directly violated some unspoken rule of polite society. Your legal problems are not our concern, she said stiffly. Then neither is my marriage. I'm doing my job. The children are learning. That's all that should matter to you. The council will hear about this. I'm sure they will. They usually do. The women left in their usual formation of righteous fury. Ellen, who'd been listening from the doorway, laughed. You've got nerve, I'll give you that. I've got nothing left to lose. Makes nerve easier. You've got a job, a husband, a place in this town. That's not nothing. It's all temporary, built on sand, one strong wind and it's gone. Then make it permanent. Prove them wrong about you. How? Keep showing up, keep teaching, keep refusing to quit. Ellen moved to leave, then turned back. And when that hearing comes, you fight like hell. Show that bastard he doesn't own you anymore. The hearing. 2 weeks away, 1 week now. Mara tried not to think about it, focused on teaching, on lesson plans, on the rhythm of school days that had started to feel almost normal. But at night, alone in her room at Ellen's, she couldn't avoid it. Darius would be there. Would probably bring lawyers, witnesses, documentation proving she was his legal wife and had no grounds for refusal. She had Rowan, a marriage certificate so fresh the ink was barely dry. And the truth, for whatever that was worth. It didn't feel like enough. A week before the hearing, Rowan came by the schoolhouse after classes ended. We need to talk about what happens when we get to county seat. Mara nodded, grateful he was willing to discuss it. What do I need to know? Judge Morrison's fair but traditional. He won't like that you ran from your husband. Won't like that you married me so fast. We need to give him a reason to rule in your favor anyway. What reason? Evidence that your first marriage was dangerous, that you had cause to leave. I don't have evidence, just scars. Scars are evidence, so is testimony. Who'd testify for me? No one here knew me before. I will. Ellen will. We can talk about what we've seen, how you showed up beaten, afraid, running, how you've rebuilt. That means something. Does it? Or does it just prove I abandoned my legal husband? Depends how we frame it. Rowan leaned against a desk. This isn't going to be easy, Mara. Darius has the law on his side, but he doesn't have the truth. That counts for something. I hope you're right. So do I. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like fire. Rowan? Mara said quietly. Yeah? If this goes wrong, if the judge rules for Darius, you don't have to stay married to me. I won't hold you to it. He looked at her for a long moment. I made a vow. Don't make vows I don't intend to keep. Even if keeping it cost you? Even then. She wanted to argue, but the expression on his face stopped her. He meant it. For better or worse, he was in this. The realization settled over her like weight and comfort combined. The week passed too fast. Before Mara was ready, it was time to leave for county seat. They took a wagon, Rowan driving, Mara beside him, Ellen insisting on coming along despite no one asking her to. The journey took most of a day, roads rough enough to rattle teeth. County seat was bigger than Red Hollow, but not by much. A proper courthouse, at least, with actual courtrooms instead of rooms above general stores. They arrived the night before the hearing and stayed at a hotel that charged too much for rooms that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. Mara barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Darius, his face, his hands, the particular way he smiled before things got bad. Morning came gray and cold. The courthouse steps felt like climbing toward judgment. Inside, the building was all dark wood and serious faces, people moving with the purposeful efficiency of those who worked in law. The courtroom was smaller than Mara expected. Rows of benches, a judge's bench at the front, tables for each party. And there, at one of those tables, sat Darius Kincaid. He looked exactly the same. Tall, well-dressed, handsome in the way that made people trust him instinctively. When he saw Mara, he smiled. That smile made her blood run cold. Beside him sat a lawyer, papers spread across the table in organized stacks. Everything about their presentation screamed competence and confidence. Rowan noticed her reaction. You all right? No, but I'll manage. They took their seats at the opposite table. No lawyer, they couldn't afford one, just Rowan, Mara, and whatever arguments they could make themselves. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Morrison entered, older than Mara expected, face lined with years of making decisions about other people's lives. He sat, arranged his papers, and looked up. Case of Kincaid versus Kincaid. Let's proceed. Darius's lawyer stood first, smoothing his jacket with the practiced gesture of someone who'd done this 100 times before. He was younger than Amara expected, clean-shaven, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of marital abandonment. Mrs. Mara Kincaid left her lawful husband without cause, without notice, and without legal justification. She took money that belonged to the household and fled across state lines. My client is simply seeking the return of his wife to their legal domicile, as is his right under the law. Judge Morrison looked down at the papers in front of him. And the defendant, Mrs. Kincaid, has since remarried? She has, Your Honor, to a Mr. Rowan Hale of Red Hollow. However, that marriage is legally void as her first marriage was never dissolved. That's not how, Rowan started, but Mara put a hand on his arm. The judge looked at them over his spectacles. Mr. Hale, you'll have your chance to speak. For now, let the petitioner make his case. He nodded to Darius's lawyer. Continue. Thank you, Your Honor. We have documented evidence of the marriage between Darius and Mara Kincaid, performed legally in Missouri in 1873. We have witnesses who can attest to the marriage and to Mrs. Kincaid's sudden departure in March of this year. We also have financial records showing money missing from the household accounts at the time of her departure. The lawyer produced papers, handing them to the bailiff who brought them to the judge. Morrison examined them with the slow deliberation of someone who'd learned not to rush judgment. Mrs. Kincaid, he said, looking at Mara directly, you're not represented by counsel. No, Your Honor, I can't afford one. I see. He set the papers down. Do you contest that you were legally married to Mr. Darius Kincaid? Mara stood, her legs steadier than she felt. No, Your Honor. We were married. And do you contest that you left without informing him of your whereabouts? No. Did you take money when you left? I took $40. Money I'd earned myself doing sewing work. It wasn't household money. It was mine. Darius's lawyer jumped in. Your Honor, Any money earned during a marriage is marital property. She had no legal right. I'll decide what's legal. Morrison cut him off. His voice was sharp enough that the lawyer sat back down. The judge turned back to Mara. Why did you leave, Mrs. Kincaid? Here it was, the moment everything balanced on. Mara took a breath. Because staying would have killed me. The courtroom went silent. Morrison leaned forward. Explain. My husband, Darius, he hurt me. Regularly. For 3 years. Started small. A shove here, a slap there. Got worse. By the end, I was afraid to speak. Afraid to move wrong. Afraid to exist in ways he didn't approve of. Her voice was steady, each word chosen carefully. I left because the alternative was dying, slowly or all at once. I chose to live. That's a serious accusation, Morrison said. It's the truth. Darius's lawyer was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, these are unsubstantiated claims made by a woman attempting to justify illegal abandonment. My client denies any abuse. In fact, he was a devoted husband who provided well for his wife. Her departure was a shock to him. Let him testify to that, Morrison said. Mr. Kincaid, stand up. Darius rose with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, tinged with what sounded like genuine hurt. Your Honor, I don't know where these accusations come from. I loved my wife, provided her with a good home, financial security, everything a woman could want. Yes, we had disagreements. What marriage doesn't? But I never raised a hand to her. Never. He looked at Mara, and the pain in his eyes looked so real she almost believed it herself. When she left, I was devastated. Spent months trying to find her, worried she'd been hurt or worse, to discover she'd simply run off and married another man. He shook his head. It's a betrayal I'm still trying to understand. He was good. Better than Mara remembered. Every word calculated to paint him as the wounded party. Morrison looked between them. Mrs. Kincaid, you claim abuse. Can you provide any evidence? Medical records, witness testimony, anything to support these claims? I have scars, Your Honor. Scars can come from many sources. These came from him. Can you prove that? Mara felt the ground shifting beneath her. No, he was careful. Never hit me where it would show in public. Never enough that I'd need a doctor. Just enough to keep me afraid. So you have no evidence. I have my word. Against his. And in matters of law, Mrs. Kincaid, word against word usually favors the party who didn't break the law first. Morrison's voice wasn't unkind, but it was firm. You left your husband. That's desertion. Whether you had good reason or not, the burden is on you to prove it. Do you understand that? Yes, Your Honor. Rowan stood abruptly. Your Honor, if I may... You may not, Mr. Hale. Sit down. With respect, I have information relevant to this case. Morrison sighed. Then speak. Quickly. I found Mrs. Kincaid, Mara, in the street in Red Hollow. She'd been thrown from a stagecoach. She was beaten badly enough that I thought she might die. Bruises on her face, her arms, her ribs, a gash on her temple that needed stitches. Rowan's voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. That's not the kind of damage that comes from tripping. That's the kind that comes from someone using their fists. Could have gotten those injuries anywhere, Darius's lawyer said. A fall, a robbery, a dozen other explanations. Could have, Rowan agreed, but she didn't. She got them from him. Can you prove that? Morrison asked. No, but I can testify to the state she was in when she arrived, and to the fact that in the months since, she's rebuilt her life. Become a schoolteacher, earned respect. Those aren't the actions of someone running from nothing. Darius's lawyer smiled, thin and cold. Or they're the actions of someone who's very good at manipulation. Who knows how to play on sympathies to avoid the consequences of her actions? Mara felt rage building in her chest, hot and dangerous. She forced it down, kept her voice level. Your Honor, may I speak? Morrison nodded. I understand this looks bad. Woman runs from her husband, shows up in a new town with no explanation, marries someone else within weeks. I understand how that sounds. She looked directly at the judge, refusing to let her voice shake. But I'm asking you to consider what it takes for a woman to leave everything she knows. To run with nothing, knowing she might die in the attempt. To choose uncertainty over security, because security came with a price she couldn't keep paying. Sentiment doesn't override law, Morrison said. I'm not asking you to override law. I'm asking you to see that sometimes following the letter of the law means sending someone back to die. That's dramatic, Darius's lawyer interjected. It's accurate, Mara shot back. She turned to Darius, met his eyes directly for the first time. Tell them about the night you broke my ribs. Tell them about the time you locked me in the cellar for 2 days because I burned dinner. Tell them about all the times you hurt me and then told me it was my fault for making you angry. Darius's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition and calculation. Your Honor, my client doesn't have to dignify these fantasies with a response, his lawyer said. No, Darius said quietly. Let me answer. He looked at Mara with what could pass for sadness. I don't know what happened to you after you left, Mara. What you've convinced yourself of. But these things you're describing never happened. Yes, we fought. Yes, you were unhappy. But I never hurt you the way you're claiming. He was lying. They both knew it. But he was doing it so smoothly, so convincingly, that Mara could see doubt creeping into Morrison's expression. Ellen stood up from the gallery. Your Honor, may I speak? Who are you? Ellen Pritchard. I run the boarding house where Mrs. Kincaid stayed when she first arrived in Red Hollow. I saw her injuries, treated them myself. And what did you observe? Bruises in the shape of fingers on her arms, old scars on her back that could only come from a belt, fear in her eyes that doesn't come from nothing. Ellen's voice was sharp, cutting. I've seen enough beaten women to recognize one when she's standing in my parlor. That's still not proof of who caused the injuries, Morrison said, but he was writing notes now. Maybe not, but it's proof they existed, proof she wasn't making it up. Darius's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, even if we accept that Mrs. Kincaid had injuries, which my client continues to deny causing, that doesn't justify her abandonment. If she was truly in danger, she should have sought legal remedy, filed for separation, gone to authorities, taken proper legal action. Instead, she ran. That's not how the law works. The law doesn't protect women like me, Mara said quietly. It protects men like him. Morrison looked at her sharply. That's a serious accusation against the judicial system. It's the truth. You know it as well as I do. How many women have stood in this courtroom asking for protection from their husbands? How many times have you sent them back because the law says marriage is sacred and a man's home is his castle? Mara's hands were shaking now, but her voice stayed steady. I'm not asking you to break the law. I'm asking you to see that sometimes the law is wrong. The courtroom was silent. Morrison set down his pen. Mrs. Kincaid, I understand your position. I do. But I'm not in the business of rewriting law because it's inconvenient. I'm in the business of applying it as it exists. He looked at his notes, then back up. However, I'm also not in the business of sending someone into a dangerous situation without being certain of the facts. So here's what's going to happen. He addressed Darius's lawyer. Your client has made a legal claim for the return of his wife. Mrs. Kincaid has made serious allegations of abuse. Without clear evidence either way, I'm not comfortable making an immediate ruling. Your Honor, the law is clear. I'm aware of what the law says. I'm also aware that I have discretion in how I apply it. Morrison's voice hardened. I'm going to take this case under advisement. I want both parties to submit written testimony within 2 weeks. Mrs. Kincaid, if you can find any witnesses to the alleged abuse, any documentation, any proof beyond your word, I want to see it. Mr. Kincaid, same applies to you. Prove your case, then I'll rule. How long will that take? Darius asked. His calm was cracking slightly. As long as I need it to. This is a serious matter, and I'm not rushing to judgment. Morrison banged his gavel. Case continued. We're adjourned. He stood and left before anyone could argue. Mara stood frozen, not sure if she'd won or lost. Darius's lawyer was already gathering his papers, whispering urgently to his client. Darius himself was staring at Mara with an expression that made her skin crawl. Rowan's hand touched her elbow. Let's go. They made it outside before Darius caught up to them. Mara, wait. Rowan stepped between them immediately. You need to back off. I just want to talk to my wife. She's not your wife. She's mine. That's not legal and you know it. Darius's smile was sharp. The judge all but said so. The judge said he's taking it under advisement. That means you don't have a ruling yet. Only a matter of time. Darius looked past Rowan to Mara. You've made this harder than it needed to be. If you'd just come back quietly, we could have worked this out. There's nothing to work out, Mara said, her voice stronger than she felt. I'm not coming back, ever. You don't have a choice. I always have a choice, even if it's dying free instead of living in your house. Something dark crossed Darius's face. For just a second, the mask slipped and she saw the man underneath, the one who'd hurt her, controlled her, broken her down piece by piece. Then the mask was back, smooth and perfect. We'll see what the judge says. He tipped his hat with mock courtesy. Mrs. Kincaid. He walked away, his lawyer hurrying to keep up. Ellen appeared beside them, breathing hard from rushing down the courthouse steps. That went about as well as could be expected. He didn't rule for Darius, Rowan said. That's something. He didn't rule for Mara either, just delayed the inevitable. Maybe. Rowan looked at Mara. You all right? She wasn't. Seeing Darius again had reopened wounds she'd thought were starting to heal, but she nodded anyway. I'm alive. That's better than I expected to be. They made it back to the hotel without further incident. Ellen insisted on staying in Mara's room that night, claiming the bed was better, but really just making sure she wasn't alone. 2 weeks, Ellen said, settling into the chair by the window. That's what we've got to find something Morrison can't ignore. There's nothing to find. Darius was careful. Then we make our own evidence. Get statements from people in Red Hollow. Show the judge that you've built a life worth protecting. That's not evidence of abuse. No, but it's evidence of character, yours versus his. Has to count for something. Mara lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. What if it doesn't? Then we figure out what comes next. Ellen, if Morrison rules for Darius, I can't go back. I'd rather die. I know. I mean it. I know you do, and I won't let it come to that. Ellen's voice was firm. We've got 2 weeks. We'll use them. The journey back to Red Hollow felt longer than the one out. Mara spent most of it silent, replaying the hearing in her head, trying to figure out what she could have said differently. When they finally pulled into town, it was late afternoon. Word had already spread. Of course it had. And people were watching from windows and doorways as the wagon passed. Rowan pulled up to Ellen's boarding house. You staying here or coming out to the ranch? Mara had been avoiding thinking about that question. I should probably come to the ranch. If we're claiming to be married, we should at least look like it. Only if you're ready. I'll never be ready, but I'll do it anyway. Ellen helped her pack what little she had. It didn't take long. Most of Mara's possessions still fit in one bag. You need anything, you send word, Ellen said. I mean it. Day or night. I will. And don't let that man make you feel small. You're stronger than he thinks. Am I? You're still standing. That's stronger than most. The ranch house was exactly as Mara remembered from her brief visit before the wedding. Small, clean, functional. Rowan showed her to a room, not his, she noted with relief, that had clearly been prepared for her. Fresh sheets, curtains that actually closed, a wash basin with clean water. Mary's things are in the attic if you want them, he said. Clothes, mostly. Might fit you. I don't want to. She's gone. Has been for 3 years. Things should get used instead of sitting in a trunk gathering dust. He paused in the doorway. I'll be up early for chores. You don't have to help if you don't want to, but the offer's there if you need something to do. He left before she could respond. Mara sat on the bed, her bed now, apparently, and tried to process the fact that this was her life. Married to a man she barely knew, living in his house, waiting for a judge to decide if she had the right to her own freedom. She unpacked her bag slowly, putting things in drawers that still smelled faintly of lavender and someone else's life. Found a nightgown laid out on the bed, Mary's probably, washed and pressed. Through the wall, she could hear Rowan moving around. The creak of floorboards, water being poured, the soft sounds of someone settling in for the night. She changed into the nightgown. It fit reasonably well. Climbed into bed and blew out the lamp. In the darkness, the house felt different than Ellen's boarding house. Quieter, more permanent, like it was waiting for her to decide if she belonged there. She didn't sleep well. Every sound made her jump, The wind against the windows, the house settling, a coyote howling in the distance. Once she could have sworn she heard footsteps in the hall, but when she got up to check, there was nothing. Morning came gray and cold. Mara found Rowan already up, coffee made, standing by the stove. "You sleep?" he asked. "Some." Liar. But there was no judgment in it. He poured her coffee. "Eggs?" "Sure." They ate in silence. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't hostile either. Just two people sharing space, trying to figure out how to coexist. "I need to go into town," Rowan said finally. "Talk to Silas, see if he knows any lawyers who might help with your case. You want to come or stay here?" "I should go to the school. I've already missed too many days." "You sure you're ready for that?" "No. But the children need consistency, and I need to pretend things are normal, even if they're not." The walk to town was quiet. Rowan split off toward Silas's place while Mara continued to the schoolhouse. She could feel eyes on her the whole way. People watching from windows, conversations stopping as she passed. The whole town knew about the hearing by now, knew she was fighting to stay away from a husband who claimed her legally. The schoolhouse was empty when she arrived. She'd beaten the children there for once. She used the time to write the day's lessons on the board, hands steady despite everything churning inside her. The children arrived in their usual clusters, but today they were quieter, watching her with something that looked like concern. Sarah approached first. "Miss Kincaid, did you win?" "The judge hasn't decided yet." "But you're still here." "For now." Tommy Brennan pushed his way to the front. "What happens if he decides against you?" Mara set down her chalk. She could lie, tell them everything would be fine. But they deserved better than that. "If the judge rules against me, I'll have to leave, go back to Missouri." "That's not fair," Emma said. "No, it's not. But it's the law." "Then the law's stupid," Tommy said flatly. "Maybe, but it's still the law." A younger boy raised his hand. "Will you fight it?" "I already am fighting it. That's what the hearing was." "But if you lose?" "If I lose, I'll keep fighting, as long as I can." Mara looked at their faces, worried, angry, confused. Children who'd somehow started to care what happened to her. "But right now, we have school. And you have lessons. So let's focus on what we can control, which is making sure you all learn something today." They settled reluctantly. The day's lessons felt hollow, mechanical, but they got through them. By afternoon, some of the usual energy had returned. Tommy started his usual trouble. Sarah asked thoughtful questions. The rhythm of school reasserted itself. When 3 o'clock came and the children filed out, Mara felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with teaching. She was gathering her things when someone knocked on the door. A woman stood there, older, maybe 60, dressed well but not ostentatiously. Mara didn't recognize her. "Miss Kincaid?" "Yes?" "My name is Catherine Wells. I heard about your situation." "Everyone's heard about my situation." "I imagine so. Small towns." Catherine stepped inside without invitation, looking around the schoolhouse with interest. "I wanted to speak with you about your case." "Are you a lawyer?" "No, I'm a widow. My husband died 5 years ago after a long illness. Before that, he was difficult." Mara set down her bag. "Difficult how?" "The same way your husband was difficult, I suspect. My Edward was a respected man. Owned half the businesses in the county where we lived. When he hurt me, no one believed it. When I tried to leave, the law sent me back. Told me to be a better wife." Catherine's voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. "I stayed because I had no choice. By the time he died, I barely remembered who I'd been before him." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because when I heard about your case, I recognized it, recognized you. A woman fighting for the right to not be owned." Catherine pulled out a chair, sat down like she planned to stay. "I want to help." "How?" "I can testify. Tell the judge what I experienced, what I saw in other marriages like mine. Show him this isn't an isolated case, that the law protects men at the expense of women's lives." Mara stared. "You'd do that? Stand up in court and talk about your husband hurting you?" "He's dead. Can't hurt me anymore. And maybe my story can help save you." "The judge might not allow it. It's not direct evidence about my case." Then we make him allow it, show him the pattern.
Make him see what he's really ruling on. Catherine stood, brushed off her skirt. I'm staying at the hotel in town. You think about whether you want my help. If you do, come find me. I'll be here another week. She left before Mara could find words to respond. That night at dinner, Mara told Rowan about Catherine's offer. You trust her? He asked. I don't know her well enough to trust her, but I believe her. That's different from trust. I know.
But right now, I'll take what I can get. Mara pushed food around her plate. Rowan, what happens if we lose this? We don't. But if we do, we don't, he repeated more firmly. I won't let that happen. You might not have a choice. There's always a choice. He set down his fork. Mara, listen to me. If Morrison rules for Darius, we don't just accept it. We appeal. We fight it every way we can. We make it so difficult and expensive for him to enforce that he gives up. And if that doesn't work, we disappear. Change names, move somewhere he can't find us. You do that? Give up everything here? This ranch? These four walls? That's not everything. That's just things. Things can be replaced. His eyes met hers. I made you a promise when we married, to protect you. I meant it. Mara felt something crack in her chest. I don't deserve that. Probably not, but you're getting it anyway. They finished dinner in silence. After Mara helped wash dishes while Rowan checked on the livestock one last time before bed. The routine of it felt almost normal, like this could be her life if circumstances were different. When she finally made it to her room, she found a letter on her pillow. Not from Rowan. The handwriting was unfamiliar, sharp, and slanted. She opened it carefully. Mara, you can run, but legal proceedings take time. I have time. I have resources. I have the law on my side. This charade with your rancher won't save you. When the judge rules, and he will rule in my favor, you'll come back to where you belong. We can make this easy or difficult. The choice is yours, but the outcome is inevitable. D. Her hands were shaking by the time she finished reading. He was right. About the law, about resources, about time. He could outlast her, outspend her, outmaneuver her in court, but he was wrong about one thing. The outcome wasn't inevitable, not as long as she kept fighting. She tore the letter into pieces and threw them in the wash basin. Tomorrow she'd find Catherine Wells and accept her offer. She'd gather every scrap of evidence, every witness, every argument she could muster. And if that wasn't enough, she'd do what Rowan suggested. Disappear. Start over somewhere new. Keep running until Darius couldn't follow. Whatever it took, she was done being owned. The morning after the letter arrived, Mara found Catherine Wells at the hotel dining room, reading a newspaper over coffee that had gone cold. I'll take your help, Mara said without preamble. If you're still offering. Catherine folded the paper, unsurprised. I am. Sit down. We have work to do. They spent the next 3 hours going over Catherine's story in detail. Her marriage to Edward Wells had lasted 22 years. The abuse had started within the first month and escalated slowly, methodically, until she'd barely recognized herself in the mirror. He broke my arm once, Catherine said, voice matter-of-fact. Told the doctor I'd fallen down the stairs. Doctor knew better, but wrote it down anyway. That's how it works. Everyone knows. No one says anything. Did you ever try to leave? Once. Got as far as my sister's house in Pennsylvania. Edward came after me with lawyers and a court order. Judge told me I had a duty to my husband. Sent me back. Catherine's hands tightened around her coffee cup. I stopped trying after that. Figured I'd wait for him to die. Eventually, he did. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm here now, aren't I? Free. Alive. Using my story to help someone else. She leaned forward. The question is whether Morrison will let me testify. It's not directly relevant to your case. We make it relevant. Show him this is a pattern, not an isolated incident. That's what I'm thinking. But we need more than just me. We need other voices. Where do we find them? Catherine smiled, thin and sharp. You'd be surprised how many women have stories like ours. They just don't talk about them. We're going to make them talk. Over the next week, Catherine proved her worth. She had connections Mara didn't know existed. Women she'd met through charitable organizations, church groups, social circles that crossed state lines. She wrote letters, made visits, called in favors with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years navigating polite society. 3 women agreed to come forward. All had similar stories. All had husbands who'd hurt them behind closed doors while maintaining respectable public faces. One had scars from cigarette burns. Another had been locked in a root cellar for days at a time. The third had lost a baby after her husband pushed her down a flight of stairs. None of them will testify unless you win, Catherine told Mara. They're too afraid, but they'll submit written statements. That's something. It wasn't enough. Mara knew it wasn't enough. But it was more than she'd had a week ago. Rowan, meanwhile, was working his own angles. He'd found a lawyer in the next county who was willing to look at the case, though he couldn't afford to take it on formally. The man had given Rowan advice, legal arguments, precedents, ways to frame the case that might sway Morrison. He says the key is showing that your first marriage was coerced, Rowan explained one evening. If you didn't enter into it freely, it's not legally binding. I entered it freely. I was young and stupid, but it was my choice. Was it? You were 16. Darius was what, 30? 28. Still too old. And did you have family? Anyone to advise you? My parents were dead. I was living with an aunt who didn't want me around. Mara remembered those days with the clarity of things she'd tried hard to forget. Darius seemed like an escape. He was handsome, successful, said all the right things. I thought I was lucky. That's coercion. Maybe not legally, but practically. Young girl, no support system. Older man with resources taking advantage. Rowan's voice was firm. We can argue that. Morrison won't care. He might, if we frame it right. The 2 weeks Morrison had given them passed faster than seemed possible. Before Mara was ready, they were back in the courthouse, back in front of the judge who held her future in his hands. This time, the courtroom was fuller. Word had spread. People had come to watch. Whether out of support or morbid curiosity, Mara couldn't tell. Morrison took his seat, arranged his papers, and looked out over the assembled crowd with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many cases like this. I've reviewed the written submissions from both parties, he said. I've read the testimonies. I've considered the legal arguments. This is not an easy case. Darius's lawyer stood. Your Honor, with respect, it should be simple. The law is clear. Mrs. Kincaid is legally married to my client. Her subsequent marriage is void. She should be returned to her lawful husband's custody. Sit down, counselor. I'll tell you when I need your input. Morrison's voice was sharp enough that the lawyer sat immediately. The judge turned to Mara. Mrs. Kincaid, I've read your statement. I've read the testimonies from Mrs. Wells and the other women. I understand what you're trying to show me, that abuse in marriage is common, that the law often fails to protect victims, that you had reason to fear for your life. Yes, Your Honor. But here's my problem. None of those statements are about your marriage specifically. They're about other marriages, other situations. And while I find them compelling, disturbing even, they don't prove that Mr. Kincaid abused you. I can prove it, Mara said. Morrison raised an eyebrow. How? Let me show you the scars. The courtroom went silent. Darius's lawyer was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, this is highly improper. Quiet. Morrison looked at Mara. You're proposing to present physical evidence? Yes, the scars on my back. They're from a belt. Multiple incidents over 3 years. They don't heal completely. They're still visible. This is degrading, Darius said, speaking for the first time. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. You're asking my wife to undress in a courtroom. She's not your wife, Rowan cut in. She's mine. And if she wants to show the judge what you did to her, that's her choice. Morrison held up a hand. Everyone calm down. Mrs. Kincaid, are you certain you want to do this? Mara's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear over it, but her voice came out steady. Yes. Very well. Bailiff, clear the courtroom. This will be done privately. Only parties directly involved and their counsel remain. The gallery was cleared amid protests and whispered speculation. When only the necessary people remained, Morrison nodded to Mara. Proceed. Mara stood. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the buttons on her dress. Ellen, who'd been allowed to stay as a witness, moved to help her. I've got it, Mara said quietly. She turned her back to the room and let the dress fall to her waist. The undershirt beneath was thin enough that the scars showed through, but she pulled it up anyway. exposing her back completely. She heard someone intake a sharp breath. Couldn't tell who. The scars were extensive, raised welts that had healed badly, crossing her back in a pattern that could only have come from repeated beatings. Some were old, faded to white. Others were newer, still pink and angry. Morrison stood, came closer. "May I?" Mara nodded. He examined the scars with the clinical detachment of someone trying to remain objective. When he stepped back, his face was carefully neutral. "You can dress." Ellen helped her this time, fingers gentle on damaged skin. When Mara turned back around, Morrison was looking at Darius with an expression that could have stripped paint. "Mr. Kincaid, do you want to explain this?" Darius's composure had cracked. Those could be from anything, an accident, self-inflicted. Those are belt marks. I've seen enough of them in my career to recognize them. Morrison's voice was cold. And they're extensive, multiple incidents, years of abuse. You don't know they came from me. Who else would they have come from? She was living in your house, under your care. Morrison sat back down, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. Less judge, more human. "Mr. Kincaid, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of men like you, respectable on the surface, dangerous underneath. The law usually protects you. Usually, I have to enforce that protection even when it makes me sick to do it." "Your Honor, I'm not finished." Morrison looked at his notes, then back up. "Mrs. Kincaid has presented evidence of severe, sustained abuse. She's shown good cause for leaving, and while the law does favor the original marriage, it also allows for judicial discretion in cases of extreme circumstances." Darius's lawyer tried one more time. "Your Honor, those scars don't prove. They prove enough. Here's my ruling." Morrison looked directly at Mara. "Your marriage to Darius Kincaid is hereby declared void on the grounds of coercion and abuse. Your current marriage to Rowan Hale is recognized as legal and binding. Mr. Kincaid's petition for your return is denied." The words took a moment to penetrate. Void, legal, denied. She'd won. Darius was on his feet, face dark with rage. "This is outrageous. You can't." "I can, and I have. My ruling is final. You can appeal if you want, but I'll tell you right now, it won't go anywhere. No appellate court wants to overturn a ruling that protects a woman from documented abuse." Morrison banged his gavel. "We're done here. Get out of my courtroom." Darius stared at Mara with such hatred that for a moment she thought he might try to attack her right there. But his lawyer grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. "This isn't over," Darius said, voice low and vicious. "You think you've won, but—" "It is over," Morrison interrupted. "And if you continue to harass Mrs. Hale, I'll have you arrested. Now get out." They left, Darius's lawyer practically dragging him. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Mara's ragged breathing. Rowan's hand found hers. "You did it. We did it." Ellen was crying, which Mara had never seen before. "Damn right you did." Catherine Wells, who'd been sitting quietly through the whole proceeding, smiled. "Now comes the interesting part." "What part?" Mara asked. "Living? Actually living, without looking over your shoulder." They left the courthouse into afternoon sunlight that felt brighter than it had any right to be. The gallery crowd had lingered outside, and when Mara emerged, a few women actually applauded. Not everyone. Some looked disapproving, scandalized by the whole affair, but enough that it mattered. Sarah was there with her mother, who looked embarrassed but determined. "Mrs. Hale," the woman said stiffly, "Sarah insisted we come. She wanted to support her teacher." "I'm glad you won," Sarah said, beaming. "Does this mean you'll keep teaching?" "If the town will have me." "They will," a voice said from behind her. Silas, the council member who'd supported her from the beginning. He looked satisfied. Morrison's ruling will carry weight. Hard to argue a woman shouldn't teach when a judge just declared her worthy of legal protection. "Some will still argue it," Mara said. "Let them. You've got enough support now to weather it." The journey back to Red Hollow felt different than the journey out. Lighter, somehow, despite the exhaustion settling into Mara's bones. "What happens now?" she asked Rowan as the wagon rattled along. "Whatever you want." "That's not an answer." "Sure it is. You're free now. Actually free. You can teach. You can stay at the ranch. You can leave if you want. It's your choice." "And what do you want?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I want you to be happy, whatever that looks like."
What if what makes me happy is staying? Then you stay. Just like that? Just like that. She leaned against his shoulder, too tired to maintain proper distance. He didn't seem to mind. When they reached Red Hollow, the town was waiting. Not everyone, but enough. Ellen had sent word ahead somehow, and people had gathered to see the outcome. Tommy Brennan was at the front of the crowd, grinning like he'd personally won the case.
You beat him, didn't you?
I did.
I knew it. Told everyone you would.
He turned to the other kids clustered behind him.
Pay up. I said she'd win.
Several children reluctantly handed over pennies and small trinkets. Mara couldn't help but laugh.
You bet on me?
Course we did. You're our teacher. The town council called an emergency meeting 3 days later. Mara attended, expecting the worst. Instead, Henry stood and cleared his throat.
Mrs. Hale, in light of recent events, the council has voted to offer you a permanent teaching position.
Full salary, no more trial periods. The school is yours as long as you want it. Mara stared. You're serious? Completely. You've proven yourself. The children respect you. Their parents might complain, but results don't lie. You're a good teacher. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me, Henry. Don't get used to it.
I still think you're too unconventional for your own good. I'll take that as a compliment. The school year continued. Autumn turned to winter, winter to spring. The children learned and grew and tested boundaries just like children always did. Some parents remained hostile, but most came around when they saw their children actually reading, actually thinking, actually excited about education. Mara and Rowan settled into a routine that worked for both of them. She taught during the week, helped with the ranch on weekends. He gave her space when she needed it, company when she didn't. They were partners in the truest sense, not romantic, not passionate, but solid, built on respect and mutual survival. One evening in late spring, almost a year after she'd first arrived in Red Hollow, Mara stood on the porch of the ranch house and looked out over land that had started to feel like home. Rowan joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He passed her one without asking if she wanted it. You thinking about leaving? He asked. No. Why would you think that? You get that look sometimes, like you're measuring distance. Not distance, just remembering how far I've come. Fair enough. He sipped his coffee. Ellen stopped by today, said enrollment's up for next term. You're getting students from neighboring towns now. Parents heard you're worth the trip. That's Ellen exaggerating. Maybe, but maybe not. He paused. You've built something here, Mara, something real. We've built something, couldn't have done it without you. You could have. Just would have been harder. She turned to look at him. Really look, for maybe the first time since they'd married. He was weathered by sun and hard work, lines around his eyes that came from squinting at horizons. Not handsome in any conventional way, but solid, dependable, safe. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. You've thanked me before. I know, but I mean it more now. He smiled, rare and genuine. You're welcome. They stood in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple that looked like hope. 2 years later, the school had expanded. Mara had convinced the town council to add another room, hire an assistant teacher for the younger children. Sarah, now 14 and sharp as a blade, helped during her free periods. Tommy Brennan had gone east to college, the first person from Red Hollow to do so. He wrote letters occasionally, always ending with some variation of, "Told you you were a good teacher." Darius had never returned. Mara heard through Ellen's network that he'd remarried quickly, found another young woman to control. She felt guilty about that sometimes, guilty that she'd escaped while someone else suffered. But Ellen always told her the same thing. You can't save everyone. You could barely save yourself. Catherine Wells visited twice a year, always bringing news of other women who'd managed to leave, to rebuild, to survive. She'd started an organization, unofficial, mostly correspondence and quiet support, for women trying to escape dangerous marriages. Mara's case had given them something to point to, proof that sometimes the law could be made to work. The marriage with Rowan had evolved. Still not romantic, still not passionate, but deeper than it had been, built on years of shared meals, shared work, shared understanding. He'd started smiling more. She'd started sleeping through the night without nightmares. One evening in early summer, with the windows open and the smell of growing things drifting through the house, Rowan looked up from the ranch accounts he was reviewing. "Ellen's retiring," he said, "selling the boarding house." Mara set down her book. "She tell you that?" "This afternoon. Said she's getting too old for it. Wants to spend her remaining years traveling instead of changing sheets." "Who's buying it?" "She wants to know if we're interested." "Us?" "Says it could be expanded, turned into a proper school with boarding for students from farther out. Give you more room to grow what you're building." Mara considered it. The boarding house where she'd first stayed, where Ellen had given her a chance when no one else would. It felt full circle somehow. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think it's your decision. I've got the ranch. This would be yours. It would be a lot of work." "You've never been afraid of work." "No." She smiled. "No, I haven't." They bought the boarding house, spent the summer renovating, turning Ellen's old rooms into classrooms and dormitories. By fall, they had 12 boarding students in addition to the day students from town. Mara hired 2 more teachers, both women, both young, both hungry to prove themselves. She remembered what that felt like. The school became known. People started calling it Kincaid Academy, though Mara insisted on Hale Academy instead. She'd earned that name, fought for it. It meant something. 5 years after she'd first arrived in Red Hollow, beaten and broken and left for dead in the street, Mara stood in front of a classroom of 40 students and felt something she'd never expected to feel. Content. Not happy. Happiness was too simple for what this was. But content. Satisfied. Like she'd built something that mattered and would outlast her. After class, a young woman appeared in the doorway. Maybe 17, bruised around the eyes, holding herself like someone expecting to be hit. "Are you Mrs. Hale?" she asked. "I am. I heard you help women who need to leave, who don't have anywhere to go." Mara set down her chalk. She'd heard this before. Women found their way to her somehow, word traveling through underground networks that only existed if you knew to look for them. "What's your name?" "Clara." "Come in, Clara. Sit down. Tell me what you need." The girl's story was familiar, too familiar. Married young to an older man, hurt regularly, trapped by law and custom and fear. She'd run with nothing but the clothes on her back. Mara listened without interrupting. When Clara finished, Mara pulled out paper and began writing. "Here's what we're going to do. First, you're staying here tonight. We have a room. Second, tomorrow we're going to see a lawyer I know. He's helped women in your situation before. Third, you're going to start thinking about what you want to build once you're free. I can't pay." "Didn't ask you to. Someone helped me once when I couldn't pay. This is how I pay it forward." Clara started crying. Mara let her, knowing sometimes tears were the only way to start healing. That night, Rowan found Mara in the kitchen, making tea for their unexpected guest. "Another one?" he asked. "Another one. You're going to fill this whole house with runaways eventually." "Maybe. That be a problem?" He leaned against the counter, considering. "No, just means we'll need a bigger house." She looked at him. "You sure about this? About all of it? I know this wasn't what you signed up for when you married me. Signed up for partnership. Helping people who need it. Seems like we're doing that." "We are." "Then I'm sure." He pushed off the counter. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight. Give her your room, you take mine, I'll take the barn. That work?" "You don't have to." "I know, but I will anyway." He left before she could thank him. 10 years after arriving in Red Hollow, Mara stood at the dedication ceremony for the new school building, purpose-built, 3 stories, with room for 100 students. The governor had come to cut the ribbon, along with state legislators and education officials. Hale Academy had become one of the most respected schools in the territory, known for taking students others wouldn't, for teaching girls and boys equally, for preparing young people to think critically instead of just memorizing facts. Mara gave a short speech, thanking the people who'd made it possible. Ellen, now 80 and fragile but still sharp as ever. Silas, who'd believed in her from the beginning. Catherine Wells, whose testimony had helped change her life. And Rowan, standing at the back of the crowd, uncomfortable with attention but present anyway. "This school exists because people took chances on someone who had nothing," Mara said, "because they saw potential instead of problems. My hope is that we continue that tradition, That every student who walks through these doors knows they have value, they have worth, and they have the right to build their own future. The applause was genuine. Not everyone in the crowd supported her. Some still thought a woman had no business running a school, but enough did that it didn't matter anymore. After the ceremony, Tommy Brennan appeared. He'd become a lawyer practicing in the state capitol and had come back for the dedication. "You did good, Mrs. Hale," he said. "We all did good. You're a lawyer now. That's partly my doing. More than partly. You're the one who told me I could be more than a ranch hand. You were smart enough to listen." Sarah joined them, now a teacher at the school herself. She'd never left Red Hollow, said everything she needed was already here. "Remember when you first started?" Sarah asked. "When half the town wanted you gone?" "I remember. Look at it now. You changed this place." "Place changed me too." That night, back at the ranch, Mara and Rowan sat on the porch like they did most evenings. The school building was visible in the distance, lit up against the darkening sky. "You ever regret it?" Rowan asked. "Staying here instead of moving on?" "No. You?" "No." He was quiet for a moment. "Mary would have liked you, would have liked what you've built." It was the first time he'd mentioned his first wife in years. Mara took it as the gift it was. "I wish I could have known her. She was good, different from you, but good in her own way." He smiled, sad but not bitter. "Think she'd approve of how this turned out?" "You think?" "Yeah. She always said the best thing you can do is leave the world better than you found it. You've done that." They sat in silence as the stars came out, scattered across the sky like possibilities. 15 years after she'd first stumbled into Red Hollow, broken and desperate, Mara Hale sat in her office at the school and read a letter from the Territorial Education Board. They wanted to use her curriculum as a model, wanted to train teachers in her methods, wanted to replicate what she'd built across the territory. She set the letter down and looked around her office. Walls lined with books, student work pinned to boards, photographs of graduating classes. Evidence of lives changed, futures built, children who'd learned to think for themselves. This was what survival looked like. Not just staying alive, but creating something that outlasted the pain that had brought her here. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." A young man entered, nervous, holding his hat. "Mrs. Hale, I'm here about the teaching position. The advertisement said you were hiring?" "I am. Sit down. Tell me why you want to teach." He settled into the chair across from her desk. "I want to make a difference. Help students who don't fit the usual mold. I had a teacher once who did that for me. Changed my whole life." "What was their name?" "Yours, actually. I was one of your first students. You probably don't remember me." I was quiet, kept to myself. "But you told me I was smart enough to do anything I set my mind to." First person who'd ever said that. Mara studied his face, trying to place him. "What's your name?" "James Pritchard. My Aunt Ellen ran the boarding house where you stayed when you first arrived." Ellen's nephew. The shy boy who'd sat in the back and never caused trouble but never spoke up either. "I remember you. You wrote beautiful essays about natural history." He looked surprised. "You remember that?" "I remember all my students. What they were good at, what they struggled with, what made them light up." She gestured to the chair. "Tell me about your training." They talked for an hour. By the end, Mara knew she'd found her next teacher. When James left, Rowan appeared in the doorway. He'd started doing that, showing up at the school during the day, helping with repairs or bringing supplies, finding excuses to be around. "Good candidate?" he asked. "Excellent. He'll start in the fall." "That makes 4 new teachers this year." 5, actually. I hired another yesterday." "School's getting too big for you to manage alone." "I know. I'm working on that." She pulled out another letter, this one from a woman in Boston who'd heard about the school and wanted to come west to help run it. "Might have found someone to handle administration while I focus on teaching. You sure you want to give up control?" "Not giving it up, sharing it. There's a difference." He nodded, understanding. "You coming home for dinner or working late again?" "Home. I promised Ellen I'd visit her after." "How's she doing?" "Failing, but fighting it, same as always." Ellen died that winter, peacefully in her sleep at 83. She left her estate, what little there was, to the school, along with a note that said simply, "Keep fighting. Someone has to." The funeral was well attended. Ellen had touched more lives than anyone realized, helped more women than she'd ever admitted to. Mara gave the eulogy, barely making it through without breaking down. She took in strays, Mara said, human and otherwise. Gave them a place to land when they had nowhere else to go. She was rough and practical and had no patience for self-pity. But she cared. In her own way, she cared deeply. This school exists because of her. I exist because of her. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to the example she set. After the funeral, Rowan found Mara sitting alone in the church, staring at nothing. You all right? She was the first person who believed I could be more than what happened to me. I know. I never got to thank her properly. She knew. Trust me, she knew. So what? 20 years after arriving in Red Hollow, Mara stood in front of her graduating class. 30 students about to head into the world with the education and confidence to make something of themselves. She'd given this speech 20 times before, but it never got easier. These were her students, her responsibility, her legacy. You're leaving here with knowledge, she told them. But more importantly, you're leaving with the ability to think for yourselves, to question, to challenge, to refuse to accept that things have to be the way they've always been. She paused. The world won't always be kind to that. People don't like it when you refuse to fit in the boxes they've made for you, but you do it anyway. You build your own boxes, or better yet, you refuse to live in boxes at all. The students applauded. Some were crying. Several rushed forward after to hug her, thank her, promise to write. When they'd all left, Sarah joined her. You're getting sentimental in your old age. I'm 42, that's not old. It's old enough to be sentimental. Sarah smiled. They'll remember this. Years from now, they'll tell their children about the teacher who changed their lives. Maybe. Definitely. That night, Mara and Rowan celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. It wasn't romantic. They'd never pretended it was. But it was real, built on 2 decades of partnership, support, and mutual respect that had somehow become love of a sort. Not the passionate kind, but the steady kind. The kind that lasted. Never thought I'd make it this long, Rowan said over dinner. Make what this long? Being married to someone as stubborn as you. Takes one to know one, he laughed. Fair point. They ate in comfortable silence. Outside, the school stood dark against the night sky, waiting for Monday when it would fill with students again. You happy? Rowan asked. Mar considered the question honestly. Yes. Not the way I expected to be, but yes. That's good enough? More than good enough. 25 years after arriving in Red Hollow, Mara received a letter that made her hands shake. It was from Missouri, from a lawyer representing Darius Kincaid's estate. He was dead. Heart attack, quick and final. The letter informed her that as his former wife, she was entitled to nothing. He'd remarried and his estate went to his widow, but they wanted her to know he was gone. Mara read the letter 3 times, trying to figure out how she felt. Relief? Yes. Guilt? A little. Satisfaction? Maybe. Mostly she felt nothing. Darius Kincaid had been dead to her for 25 years. This just made it official. She showed the letter to Rowan. How do you feel? He asked. Free? Finally, completely free. You've been free for years. Legally, yes, but there was always that small part of me that worried he'd come back, that he'd find some way to take everything away. She folded the letter carefully. Now he can't. Now it's really over. That night, she burned the letter in the fireplace and watched the ashes drift up the chimney. 30 years after arriving in Red Hollow, Hale Academy celebrated its 30th anniversary. The school now had 200 students, 15 teachers, and a reputation that extended across 3 territories. Mara had stepped back from daily teaching 5 years earlier, focusing instead on curriculum development and teacher training. She still taught 1 class a week, her favorite, where she worked with the students no one else wanted, the troublemakers, the ones who didn't fit, the ones who reminded her of herself. The anniversary celebration was massive. Former students came from all over the country. Lawyers, doctors, teachers, business owners, all people who'd passed through her school and taken pieces of it with them. Tommy Brennan gave a speech. Mrs. Hale taught us to think. Sounds simple, but it's revolutionary. She didn't fill our heads with facts and expect us to regurgitate them. She taught us to question everything, including her, especially her. That's the mark of a real teacher. Afterward, a young woman approached Mara. Mrs.
Hale, I wanted to thank you. For what? My mother came through here 20 years ago. You helped her leave an abusive marriage, gave her a place to stay, connected her with a lawyer. She built a whole new life because of you. What's your mother's name? Clara Johnson. Was Clara Hartwell when you knew her? Mara remembered. One of dozens of women she'd helped over the years, but she remembered. How is she? Thriving. She runs a boarding house in Denver now, does for other women what you did for her. The young woman smiled. I'm named after you, actually. Mara Elizabeth Johnson. I'm honored. You saved her life. She wanted you to know that. After the celebration, Mara found Rowan sitting alone on a bench outside the school. Big day, he said. Overwhelming day. You did good. We did good. He smiled. Yeah, we did. They sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar colors. 30 years. An entire lifetime built from nothing, from rock bottom, from being left for dead in the street. You know what the best part is? Mara said. What? It's still not over. School's still growing, students still coming, the work continues. You going to keep doing this until you die? Probably. You? Probably. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, the same stars that had watched over them for 3 decades. The same sky that had seen her arrive broken and watched her rebuild into something stronger. Red Hollow had changed. So had Mara. The town that once threw her away now considered her one of their own. The woman who'd been left for dead had become the force that shaped a generation of students to think differently, act differently, be different. She'd survived. More than survived. She'd built something that mattered. And that, she thought as Rowan's hand found hers in the darkness, was better than any revenge she could have imagined. The woman left for dead had taught an entire town how to change, and in doing so, had changed herself.